This is the first of 3 videos showing how Git is supported on within Autoplot using GitHub and GitLab sites. These can be public sites like github.com, or some universities have set up their own servers, for example, researchgit.uiowa.edu. First of all, what is Git? Git is a repository system that lets you kind of keep track of changes in code and distribute code changes to other people on your team. So if I go over to Autoplot's GitHub site, you can see there's a number of applications here. And what I'll show today is running one from this development area, which I use for demonstrating new features or demonstrating bugs and correcting bugs. So for example, if I go into this demos area, here's an example of one of the scripts. And the script is just a small bit of Python code that tells Autoplot to do something. This one is just going to draw a vertical line on Autoplot's display. So if I run Autoplot and then I copy this location here into Autoplot and run it, it shows me basically the arguments that the script takes, the location, whether it's horizontal or vertical or blue or whatever colors I suppose I can have. This is the script itself, and notice when you run the script the first time, it'll show the script, and then that's so you can have an opportunity to look for any malicious code that might be in there. So in general, you don't want to run scripts from anybody you don't know or from sites you don't trust. We control this GitHub site, so only a trusted group of people are able to make modifications to it, so you can safely run code from there. So if I say OK, that's going to run the script and it's going to put a vertical strike there. So that's very useful to be able to just have functionality that's available to everybody. I can easily make changes to it by logging in and making changes on the site, or I have a local copy of it, and then I can do what's called pushing those changes up to the server so that those changes are reflected on the server. And that's what these videos are going to show, how you might do that with your team. So you'll notice here this dev site is marked public, and I'm not logged in. So the only sites here are public sites. But if I had a private site that I didn't want anybody besides other team members to see, I can do that now as well. Until recently, you couldn't do that. You couldn't use those with Autoplot. So if I sign in quickly, so now I'm logged into GitHub. GitHub knows it's me, and it knows that it can show me this private study because I have access to it. If I look inside it, I can see that there's a README and just a trivial script that just puts up a message, basically. So if I want to use that within Autoplot, I have to make what's called a git clone. And what that is that's a local copy of the Git. Autoplot, when it's a public site, is able to grab stuff off that public site and bring it to the local machine and run them there, so you don't have to clone everything. But when it's a private site, you have to clone the entire repo. So everything underneath this private study, which is just one file right now, needs to be cloned. So to do that, I would go to the command line, and I'll need the terminal on my Mac. So to run that, I go to Applications, and then there's a Utilities folder under Applications, and then this terminal program, which actually is quite useful. So I just end up putting it on my Docker here. My Dock, I think that's what it's called. And then I can, so I can say git clone, and then you want to copy this location. So if I copy this, it's going to say I don't have permission to do that. And the reason why is because GitHub doesn't know who this Mac is, and it doesn't know that it's safe to do that. You'd think it would ask for a password or something like that, but it uses public and private keys to do authentication, which is much more secure than doing passwords. So what I need to do is I need to create a key on the Mac. So I use the command ssh keygen. And actually, before I run that, let me show you a special directory, .ssh. And I believe under your home directory, any Mac should have this directory in there. I think maybe it's once you've used SSH, it appears there, but I'm pretty sure it's always there. So what I'm looking for is a file called, I'm sorry, I can't remember what it's called, but I don't have that file here. I'll point it out to you in a second. And that means that I can safely create a new key. So if I say SSH keygen, what it's going to do is it's going to create a public and private key. So it's this ID RSA is the file I was looking for. That file's not there, so I can go ahead and I can run it. So I'll just use the default here. And you can give it different names if you're already using that file for a different key to access a different site. Oftentimes you'll use the same key with different sites though. You can't have a passphrase. That's when you actually need to type in a password as well as the public and private key. Autoplot doesn't support that, and most sites don't use that. Okay, so what that's created is two files, idrsa and idrsa.pub. This public one is the one that GitHub is going to know about. It's never going to see idrsa, and it's important that only I see that file because that essentially is the secure half of the public and private keys. If that were to get, if somebody were to access that file, they would be able to access any site that I use that public key with. But normally what I would do is if I knew that it had been compromised, I would just delete my public keys and then I don't have to worry about it. Okay, so so going over to GitHub, if I go to my login here, you'll have to have a login. I go to settings, and this is for GitHub that I'm showing here. Some universities have an instance of GitHub running on their machine that they support and provide to people for research at their universities. There's also software called GitLabs that is very similar to GitHub, and both software are supported through with Autoplot and should be fairly similar. If I go down here to SSH and GPG keys, this is all the public keys that I've already put in there. So it already has two keys that I'm using. And if I say new SSH key, what it wants me to do is enter in the contents of this file here into that site. So if I say cat just prints out what's in that file. If I copy the contents of that into where the key goes, and it wants me to give the name, so I'll just put in today's date for so I don't have to think of something unique. And you can see here that it's added the key and it now recognizes that. So now if I want to do a clone, what I do is I go back over to Autoplot and back over to private study, and then under code SSH, I copy this location. Copy. Go back to this temporary area. Right. Git clone and then paste. Okay. And what that's done is that's made a copy of that directory into here. So if I look in here, I can now see it. And it's the same thing that's on that remote site. And anybody that had access to that particular site would be able to make copies like this. The idea is that the team is making changes to this local copy. When you're satisfied with the changes, you're going to push those changes up to GitHub or wherever the remote server is so that other people on the team can access the file. So I'll show you at the command line how you make a change. Well, let me run the script first in Autoplot. Okay, so it shows me this, so it makes me inspect it to make sure there's no code that's going to hurt my machine. There's no parameters to this script. So if I run it, it just brings up a thing. So if I want to, so say I'm working with my team members, and my team, someone else on the team knows how to make changes. I'll show those changes in the next video. But they're going to modify this file. So So let's say they put in some sort of change here. Normally I'd say, sorry, they're going to say why they made that change. And that's, you can see a history here. Okay, but of course, you know, if you look here, that's the same file as always. And of course, when you run that in Autoplot, it's going to do exactly the same thing. So if you want to get changes from your remote team members, you're going to do what's called a get pull. And what that's going to do is you can think of it as pulling those remote changes to your site. So if I do a more on that file now, you'll see that the change they made is now reflected in this code. And if I run it in Autoplot, it shows me a blue line here showing that that line changed. I think I can mouse over it and see what it was before. Yep, text has been changed. And I can run it now, and it's got the new message. So normally when you're doing this kind of work with a restricted a script that's been restricted to a work group, you'd start your analysis by doing a get pull, because you'll only see changes that remote members have made when you're ready to see them by doing that get pull, and then you can run the analysis and see how it's see what the new result is. So I'm going to show two more videos. The second is going to show how you can use Autoplot itself to look at the changes, and actually you can make changes on the remote one within Autoplot and then push those to other team members. And then the last step will be connecting that local repo to kind of the remote site. So Autoplot knows that there's that remote site out there, and you can actually push the changes within Autoplot to the remote site.